Great. Welcome, everyone. Again, I'm Gemma Wood, the Monitoring and Evaluation Manager at the UN Trust Fund. And today's session is on communications. And in particular, we'll give you an overview of our communication guidelines, including use of our logo, the UN Trust Fund logo, which you can see hopefully clearly behind me. That's always behind me. It's sunny today. And we'll also explain how you can use that logo on your promotional materials, on your website, and also some tips on sharing your stories on your social media, on our social media, some tips for use of photos, and how to develop case studies. Today's session is quite short. It will probably be only about 20 to 30 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions. And as always, you can ask questions on anything that we've been covering in the last 8 sessions. So I'm going to share the presentation now. And you should have received the communications guidelines, which were section 8 of the handbook. The communications guidelines goes more in depth, particularly on technical details of what size and fonts and so forth our logo has to be. It also includes some very useful links to websites and our social media sites as well. So I encourage you to read the guidelines. So yes, so Module 8. So as I said, we have some communications guidelines. It's worth reading these and also sending them to anybody in your organization who manages your social media, who manages your communications, or who might be wanting to use the logo or so forth. The communications guidelines will hopefully answer any questions you have about use of the logo, how to submit stories of photos of your project to us at the Trust Fund, and how to talk and write about the Trust Fund. We want you to use our logo, the UN Trust Fund logo, on your publications, your materials and events. So we've included a link to the logo. So we have a Dropbox with the file for the logo in French, English, and Spanish with an explanation on how to use it. Every time you want to use the logo, you will need to ask for advice and approval. So this session will go through that. It will also go through some information about social media. It will also give you some tips on use of photos, case studies, and web stories. And also we have some tips in the guidelines on how to write a good feature story so that if you do want to be featured on our website, that's a good format to use. So starting with the communications guidelines. As I said, please do read them thoroughly. They do explain how you should seek approval for the logo when you use it, and how to present photos, case studies, and stories. So the guidelines go through how you use the logo. It will go through how you can use the logo on promotional materials, and it will also talk about how to use the logo at events and meetings, and what language to use. So I've just heard, sorry, I'm just going to stop a second because I hear that there's some people are having technical issues. But most of you are hearing very well. Okay, good. So most of you are hearing very well. So I'm afraid if you are having technical difficulties, it might be on your end, and I would suggest starting again, reinstalling and starting again. So sorry about that. Okay, so back to the communications guidelines. So the communication guidelines tells you about the specifications of the logo, what color to use, and so forth. It will also tell you how to use the UN Trust Fund's name in terms of how we like abbreviations and so forth. It gives you links to our social media, tips for use on photos and videos, and how to credit, for example. It talks about the ethical concerns, which is, as you may have noticed, a big priority for us in terms of getting consent. And then we have some tips on how to write case studies, because we want to hear from you at any time on good stories that we can present on our website. So let's go through this step by step. So how about social media? Well, on social media, we have a Twitter account, we have an Instagram account, we have a Facebook account. And if you're familiar with any of these types of social media, you'll know how to use hashtags and the handlebar and so forth. If you don't, we actually have a whole separate optional session on using social media. We don't want to take up your time today if you already know how to use social media. So we have a whole other optional session which is already recorded on use of social media. But what we do ask you, the basic thing, is if that you decide to talk about the trust fund on Twitter, for example, that you would use our hashtag, which is hashtag UNTF, when you're referring to us. And of course, we do exactly the same for you. So after this session, we will encourage you to send us, you can send to your portfolio manager, let us know your Twitter, let us know your Facebook, and we can follow you back and we can be cross-posting and referencing each other so that we can amplify your updates and you can amplify us. And also, of course, the best way to do that is to send us your photos and stories and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. It's obviously early in the days in your project, but there is no harm in sending us stories of events that you're having early in the project. You can just say, we had a launch event for the project. That's still a good news and a good story to tell. So those are our social media hashtags, hashtag UNTF and at UN Trust Fund eval for Twitter. And I've got some links at the end to these. So what about using photos? Well, we're very, very keen to get photos and stories from your project. But when you do want to use a photo, this is both a recommendation to you and also essential to us. Please consider what we call the 3 C's, which means credit, caption, and consent. Credit, caption, and consent. So on consent, all individuals featured in photographs taken for use by the UN Trust Fund must consent to be photographed and understand that the photo may be used by the Trust Fund, and we recommend this for your organization too, in publications and online. So be aware that if you do send us photos, we may use them in publication or online. So the people in the photo need to be aware of this. Please always keep in mind and take special care and consideration if the people in the photo are survivors of violence, to ensure they have given permission to be photographed and are comfortable being photographed, and they understand that photos may be featured in communication materials. And they must fully understand that their image will be used in the context of information about ending violence against women and any possible implications, which might include, for example, the image being seen by the perpetrator of violence or the family or friends or colleagues. So you may think, well, we're here in New York, but our Facebook messages do get out worldwide, and there's a lot of people on Facebook and Twitter, so you never know, these photos could be seen by friends and family of the people in the photo. But never fear, we do have ways of getting consent. We have in the communication guidelines a sample consent form which they can sign, and in the event of a big event, say, you know, in the right here, there's a picture of an event which is in a field, and you'd think, well, how on earth do I get consent from everyone? Well, what we recommend, for example, is on the posters or the flyers or the general information about the event when people arrive, that you warn them, by attending in this event, you may be photographed. By attending this event, you give your consent that there will be photographers around. And in that way, they will know that there may be a photographer around, and they can opt out if they choose, if they don't want to be photographed. But if you're if you're taking a photograph of a group, such as this group on the left of school children, there's only a few of them, so there's sufficient time to get consent and to get forms signed. And in this case with children, you would also have to get the permission of the parents or the school, and the school would get the permission from the parents. So as I said, the exception in issues of consent is public demonstrations and marches and other events, so where the press might be there anyway. So if it's an event that you're organizing, you can definitely explain when people arrive that there may be photographs taking. If it's a public demonstration, like much of the 16 days of activism events, they may be demonstrations in the streets, you have no control over that. So if there are press and photographers around, then there's not the necessity for you to get consent. But if it's an event that you have personally organized or your organization, you should make every effort to get consent. So with this in mind, do send as many photos as you can, obviously within limits of your time, but if you see a good photo with a good caption, then send it to us and tell us the story. The story doesn't have to be long, because with social media you don't have much space to tell the story. The second issue on caption is that we will need to know the name of the photographer. Even if that's you personally and you wish to be cited, you would say who the photo was taken by or whether it's owned by your organization. You would also tell us, if they gave their permission, the names of the people in the photo, or at least tell us in the caption what the event is, what the purpose of the event was, why the people were around. So something as simple as a photo and caption can be very powerful when shared on social media. So that's photos. Oh, and on photos, we have, if you're not aware of this website, we'll explain, but we have what's called a Dropbox folder. You may be aware of software that you can transfer files. So we use Dropbox, that you can send us big files that might be quite large, megabytes. We can also use WeTransfer. So if the photos are too large for your email, just let us know, and we have a range of options for you to send us the photos. But don't forget credit, caption, consent. So what about case studies then? If it's a bit more than a photo and you have a story to tell, we love to hear case studies, which is just little stories about your project to highlight the results and the stories of your beneficiaries or your organization. And ideally, we love case studies which will tell the story of your project through the voice of the beneficiary and the change that you're creating. So when you're thinking of a case study or success story to share, keep in mind that success can come any time of the project, so you can have stories right now. These stories can then be featured by us on our website, in our annual report, in our report to the UN Commission on the Status for Women, and in fact sheets. And our objective in sharing these stories is to promote your organization. We in no way want to take credit. We will always promote your organization. We want to give your organization platform for visibility, and we will always give full credit to your organization, but simply say that it's funded by the UN Trust Fund. For your story to have the most impact, we want to hear how your project is really changing the lives of women and girls, or it will do in the future. So of course, right now it's early days, but even say photos of a project launch event, if they show pictures of people taking an active part, you can say this project aims to benefit women and girls and aims to end violence against women. So you can always tell us what the target of the project is, even if you haven't got concrete results. So there's an example on the right of a story from Thailand, I think from Asia, empowering refugee women and girls. So there's an example there. This was a project implemented by International Rescue Committee on the border of Thailand in refugee camps. And you can see that the refugees from Myanmar. So you can see that it's very short, so you don't have to write that much. And this was published on our website. And in the guidance, in the annex, there's a handy tip sheet for how to write case studies. It's called, in Appendix 1, the UN Trust Fund feature or web story writing template. So we have a template which sets out how we like to see stories, which you might also find useful for your own story writing. But I know from looking at many of your websites and Facebooks already that many of you are very experienced in this already. Probably have more stories than us. So creating your story for us, if you want us to promote your organization, we absolutely love quotes. So quotes from beneficiaries or quotes that can be both secondary and primary. So quotes from, say, a school teacher if you're working in a school, quotes from a government official if you've successfully partnered with government, quotes from the women and girls that you work with, or a man that may have changed his attitude towards gender. There's all sorts of quotes we would be interested in. And that would set the scene for the story. It's always important in your story to tell us what form of violence your project addresses. And we've been through this quite a bit with the results frameworks as well. It's very important to describe the form of violence because that really sets the background and gives context. Are you mainly focused on domestic violence? Are you focused on sexual harassment in public? Are you focused on sexual violence from non-intimate partners? So do describe the form of violence that you're tackling and why. As this is the beginning of the project, you can describe the situation in your community. Maybe there's high rates of violence. Maybe there's a very specific issue that you or your project is addressing. And then you can describe what support the UN Trust Fund is providing in terms of the grant amount and the period of the project. And tell us if you have anything, either the results that you've achieved or the results you will aim to achieve. So give us this context and this information. And as I said, we're ideally interested in really how your project is hoping to transform the lives of women and girls. How is it aiming to transform the situation from that baseline into something more positive for the community or your target group? And then in closing, you can highlight whether or not the project aims to continue in the future, whether it will be sustainable. This is more for when the project ends. But any interesting issues on how, when the project closes, the results will be sustained. But at this stage, in your very early days, you probably won't have that particular information. So do go ahead at any time when you have time. And I know this is one of the real tricky things to find time for when you're doing day-to-day project management. We always would love to have more time to do the communications. We're hoping that by giving you this template, you can see that there doesn't need to be a great deal of information, just say half a page, and that can be a powerful story. So coming to nearly the end of the session, I wanted to highlight our Facebook pages. So we have our own website. The website itself, I'm just going to go to it, is updated maybe once a week or so. It's not updated as regularly as, say, Twitter, but on our website, you can go to news and events, and you will see the type of stories that we're doing, such as this one right now in October. We talked about a project in Nigeria where we're supporting a violence against women project, but in specifically working to protect girls, young girls, against violence. And you can see that it's not too long. It's probably about 1,000 words, if that. And we will always, and you quote the organization itself, which was the Sexual Offences Awareness and Victims Rehabilitation Initiative in Nigeria. So this is about promoting your organization. So on our website, you will see the kind of case studies that we like to see. And then on our Twitter, if you're familiar with that, we'll always have very, very short stories. So our last message was from Daniela, a beneficiary of a UN Trust Fund grantee in Argentina. She's a lady with disabilities who joined us at the United Nations, who talked about the project that she's involved with and supported the rights of women and girls with disabilities to also be incorporated in all programming. So as you can see, it was very, very short, but still powerful. And on Twitter, we very much welcome picture. We have to have a picture. And we will always do our best to put the hashtag of the organization that we're working with, if you have a hashtag. So that's why please send your hashtags and details to your portfolio manager. And on Twitter, we will obviously update almost daily. On Facebook, it's a similar situation to Twitter, where we will do our best to share stories almost every day to keep it up to date and current. And with Facebook and Twitter, it's very simple that we can just forward your stories. So come look for us, like us on Facebook, and we can like you back, and then we can share your stories. We do have an Instagram. If anyone knows about that one, that's just for photos, no text. And then I wanted to flag, which I've talked to you before about, is we do have a private Facebook group, which is just for networking between yourselves. And it won't be, it's not for communication purposes, but it is for knowledge sharing. And you have to request to join. But here it's a good way to share your photos with other grantees. And this is a good example that we have from an organization we fund in Kosovo. They've shared their photos of their 16 days of activism work, which is always wonderful to see. So those are our primary social media sites. And on that, as I mentioned, we have if you follow the link at the end, we have a completely optional webinar on use of social media. So it will go through how to use social media and how to use statistics, key messages, how to use social media for engagement and for advocacy. And it's 1 hour, 30 minutes, so it's quite long. So when you get a chance, and if you're involved in communications, you may want to watch that. And just a final word, you may notice, of course, that the social media training was actually provided by UN Women. UN Trust Fund has separate hashtags and stories from UN Women. So we do ask you to make sure that you're using UN Trust Fund. We love UN Women. We're part of UN Women. But we specifically ask that you use UN Trust Fund hashtags and UN Trust Fund handles because the funding comes from the UN Trust Fund, not UN Women. However, if you are co-funded, of course, you will want to show the logos of many of your donors, not just the Trust Fund. So we do have specific guidance on that in the materials, that all logos should be placed on the same line, preferably on the front cover, say, of publications. So if you are funded by more than one donor, of course, you would be using not just our logo, but their logo as well. So that concludes the session. As I said, it's quite a short session focused on encouraging you to share your photos and stories with us, and to use social media to promote yourselves and to promote the trust fund. Any use of the logo or photos, you must get permission through your portfolio manager. So if you want to use the logo, please email your portfolio manager, and they will also ask you to show them how it will be placed on materials. So if you wish to use the logo on promotional materials, on a publication, you will need to get approval from us before you use it. So that's it for today's session. Short and sweet. So I'm going to stop the presentation and see if you have any questions. We do have a communications and advocacy specialist in the team. Unfortunately, she couldn't join today, so I may not be able to answer all the questions. But if you have anything that I can't answer, I will go and ask our communications expert. So yes, please, if anyone has any questions on this session or any of the other previous sessions, and as you have seen, this is actually going to be the last session, yay, until the new year. So we won't have any more sessions until January, when you will have a session on reporting and on knowledge management. But of course, you can always be sending questions to your portfolio manager, and I will also be sending you at this point in the training, I will send you a survey to find out what more or less more information you would like on any of the topics, so we don't miss anything. You can always send an email also to your portfolio manager if you say, we really want to learn more about data collection, or you really want to know more about the baseline, or if you really want to know more about something in the financial management session, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Nindi. Do we need to share the consent forms with the UN Trust Fund together with the pictures when we're sharing them? No. We trust that you keep the consent forms on file. No, there is no need to share them with us. We just trust that you have got that consent. And also, because we're asking you for the ethical protocols for data collection, we will see for ourselves through that process how you approach ethics and safety. So after that point, no, there's no need to send us any documents. So Rob asks, where will we find the sample consent form? So the sample consent form is in the final page of the guidelines, which is the Grantee Handbook, Section 8. Final section of the guidelines. It's in English. We will also be sending the French and the Spanish version, and so you might have to translate it, obviously, into your local language. And of course, you can adapt it. There is no right or wrong way, particularly of asking for consent, as long as you set out why you're taking the photo, and that it may be used in promotional materials, and you get them to sign and date it. You can adapt that form, obviously, to your context and to your organization, and you can do a separate consent form for each event, or you can do a generic one. The one that we've done is very generic. It says the photos may be used in promotional material, in publications. So it's a good one to use because it covers all possibilities. Hi, Eunice. You said, is this the last session? It is until January. So this is session 8 of the 10. And in January, I think it will be January the 15th, we will be doing the session on knowledge management, and then we will be doing the session on reporting. So there'll be 2 more. Oh, and we do have the communications expert online. So Adina, I don't know which one you are. If you want to say anything, I'll have to take you on mute, but it's not possible to see who you are. Maybe it's call-in user 2. Adina?
Gemma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi. Yes, I'm just on the call. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Adina, the external relations and advocacy analyst for the UN Trust Fund.
Great. You're a little bit quiet. Are you at home?
Yes, I'm just on my phone.
Okay. Okay, you're a little bit quiet, but I can just about hear you. So if there's any difficult questions, I'll pass them to you.
Sounds good.
Oh, well, this is a good one for you. So, Adina, how long does it take for consent to be given in use of logos? Do you have a particular turnaround time that you aim for?
Sure, absolutely. We really aim to get back to you as soon as possible within 1 day or 2 days. Usually it's very fast. And if we have any edits, we'll let you know exactly what would need to change on the logo. For instance, it's usually an issue of if it's stretched or if the colors are not exactly how they are. Otherwise, it's usually very straightforward, and we'll let you know as soon as possible.
Okay, so just in case you didn't hear that, Adina was saying between 1 and 2 days we'll aim to get back to you. Obviously, that's business days. And I'm not sure it was in the presentation, Adina's email. So on communications, you can email the portfolio manager, but also Adina, because that would be it will be faster to email both at the same time. Oh, well, there you go. We haven't met our goal. Sorry, and if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Nindi. Nindi has apparently sent a request. If you can re-forward that. And also I'm going to put, it may be because, as I said, it helps to copy Adina in. Yes, it may be the portfolio managers can get very busy with a lot of emails. So if there's something specific on communications, you can also copy in Adina. Eunice asks, are we supposed to use specific colors? Adina, do you want to answer that, or shall I?
Sure. Just the logo itself is in color or in black and white, and we just ask that you use one of those and not change the color.
Great. Yes. So you can use either the colors or in black and white, but they have to get approval. And don't worry about holding us to account. So Nindi would say, "Oh no, yeah, we're here. You hold us to account as well for the times. We're asking you to do things at a certain time period, so you can also hold us to account. That's important." So I put the email address for Dina there, but I will also send it in an email. So yes, the guidance includes the very specific information in about colors. Association Elical, is it okay for communications tools and success stories and video testimony in Arabic? Well, I think I might ask Dina. I know that we obviously do have, although we don't publish in Arabic, we do obviously have other UN women officers that would be able to share the story in Arabic. Do you have any tips on that, Adina?
Sure, or we might do that, or you might be able to share it on social media, for instance, or if it's something really compelling down the line that we might be interested in using, maybe together with a UN Trust Fund produced video story, for instance, and we might contact you for translation, but there's no harm in sending it because we might be able to use it on social media or share it with other offices.
Yeah, so maybe you would, if you have something in your local language or dialect, you would have to tell us what it was in English at least, so we would understand. But then we could find, a forum to share it in that. So we will always, as I said, we are the UN Trust Fund. We have to use the UN Trust Fund logo on our UN Trust Fund platforms. But we use the UN Women platform, and they're based in many countries in many different languages. We will use their network to amplify your stories. Eunice says, do we have to share the story first with the portfolio manager for approval before posting it to the page? No, I would just, when we're talking about these case studies and stories, we're talking about things that we would like you to share with us so that we can publish it for you on our websites and our social media, which of course, yes, we would be reviewing it, checking it. If you want to share stories on your own social media, we don't approve those, do we, Adina? We don't have the time to do that, sadly. So they can go ahead and share things on their social media using our hashtag without our approval. Is that correct?
Oh, right. Of course. Absolutely. Anything that's going on their social media or websites, we just ask for content that we would then continue to shape and put onto our website in terms of case studies, and that's what we're asking for.
Yeah. So just to be clear, and I might put this in the email, we only need approval for use of our logo, printed logo, and the visual identity of use of our logo on your materials. We don't need you to ask requests for using our hashtag or our handle in social media because we don't have time to review every social media article. So you don't need to get approval for that because we would always spot something if we weren't happy with it, we would tell you. It's the approval that you need is for use of the logo in printed materials, in publications, in banners. But what we do have in the guidance is tips. So we do ask that you, wherever you can, adhere to our standard language that the Trust Fund would like you to use in terms of how you talk about us using the abbreviation UN Trust Fund, not UNTF. Always mandatory to use the UN abbreviation, UN for United Nations. So we have tips in the guidance, but we will not be asking or approving every social media story, not at all. What we have included is a tip for writing a good case study, and we do ask that you think about sending them to us so that we can feature them for you. And if we feature your story on our website or our social media, then yes, it will go through more checks and balances. For example, we will be checking that you got consent, but we will in no way be reviewing your own posts. No, that's your organization, your responsibility. We don't want to be that controlling. Do you want to add anything, Kadina?
No, I think you've covered it. Thanks, everybody. And I will definitely see where that request is for the logo and see and definitely get that cleared out. But otherwise, thanks so much.
Thank you. So any further questions? I think if you read the guidance, it will be very clear, about what you need to get approval and what not. Thank you, everyone. As I said, do take a look at the optional session on use of social media if you do have more questions about social media. And apart from getting approval for use of the logo, all we're saying is send us your stories, connect with us on social media. Together we can amplify and share our stories, and our voice will get louder. and the messages will be louder the more we promote each other. And yes, so thank you, Nindy. So yes, for those who celebrate Christmas, yes, Merry Christmas. And we won't be in touch again until the new year, so we can celebrate the new year together with another session. Whoa, what a nice New Year's present! A session on reporting and knowledge management. You're very welcome to send us any questions at any time. And I know that all of you are working on, well, obviously your day-to-day project, but also your finalizing data collection methods and results frameworks and indicators. So any questions on that, you can contact the portfolio manager. And if there's any delays, you can also contact me. You will have my email. So if you're experiencing any delays, just let us know. There's absolutely no harm in sending us another email. Great. So thank you, everyone. And if there's no more questions, that was nice and short, and you can all go whenever you feel like leaving.
Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you, Adina. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Bye, everyone.